So, a very good evening, friends. On this platform of ClearText, we have come together this evening, myself, C. Aanchal Kapoor, and today we are going to discuss the provisions relating to certain input tax credit, the provisions that have been made stringent now. I always say, input tax credit, my dear friends, is the heart and soul of GST. And we don't understand where this heart and soul is getting lost. Am I right? Yeah. So I always say it's like a slime. You try to catch hold of it and it keeps slipping from your hands. Likewise, is going the fate of the input tax credit itself. Now, friends, if we talk about the input tax credit, let me discuss a few things. Of course, we will be discussing the introduction of 2B and how the Rule 36.4 will also be washed away. The input tax credit will be eligible only for those invoices which will be appearing in your 2B. So, apart from this, I will be starting up with the very basic provisions of input tax credit, connecting those to how these will be related to the provisions of 2B introduction and none other than the amendment 16 to AA also. Now, friends, if I talk about input tax credit, I hope we will be learning together from each other, right? So, if I talk about this input tax credit, and we say that in case of input tax credit, we come across a number of issues. I told you, it's like a slime that keeps slipping out of your hands. We have issues of 180 days, ITC not reflecting in 2A, 2B, tax on the sale of capital goods, RCM with the taxes paid uh, to RCM paid after the September. So, in all these situations, if we talk about the provisions, let me start with the very basic provisions, my dear friends, and that is the definitions. If I talk about the definitions, so the definition of the input tax credit is itself given under the clause 2, section 2, clause 63, the input tax credit, nothing. It means the credit of input tax, and input tax is being defined under 2 clause 62. The most important funda of this definition is, my dear friends, the first foremost words. Sorry, I'm not able to mark it today, so excuse me for that. But what it wants to highlight over here is input tax in relation to a registered person. So, what is the foremost concern here? You will get the input tax credit only if you are a registered person. If the person is not a registered person, he will not be getting the credit. So, my dear friends, the question arises here also that if we purchase certain goods, certain inputs, certain input services before we get registered, reason I was not crossing the threshold of 20 lakhs. So I decided that not to take the registration because I'm not a registered person at that time. I will not be eligible for any sort of input tax credit, no tax on output, and no eligibility of input will be there, except, yes, I knew it, that you will be talking about the 30 days prior period. Absolutely. So, if I talk about, there is only one special circumstance, and that too for the input and input services only, as per section 18, subsection 1, which says that prior to registration, 30 days prior to registration, if you procure any input or input services, you will be eligible to take the credit for the same, provided you take the registration within a period of 30 days post that. Now, but that too is not applicable on the capital goods. It's not applicable on the capital goods. Reason, that is not covered by 18 subsection 1. So if your client wants to have any sort of machinery or something, first tell them to get registered and then go for any sort of procurement of the capital goods, right? Chaliye. So we talked about the basic provision of it. We talked about that, okay, section 2 clause 62 talks about that you must be a registered person, so you will be eligible to get the credit of CGST, SGST, IGST, UTGST, whatever taxes you are paying under reverse charge, whatever IGST you are paying on the imports. Friends, why import is separately mentioned? Because imports attract some different sort of document, underlying document reason. Now, let me ask you one question. First of all, if I say you that 180 days period criteria, I am not paying my creditor who is situated in USA within a period of 180 days from whom I made the imports. Will the provisions of 180 days will go for reversal of the credit in case of imports? The answer to it is no. And you know why? Because it is not. Some people says, yeah, I can see some people says that it is on RCM basis. So the answer to it is this: no. Imports are not on RCM basis. Import of services is on RCM basis. But the underlying document for imports is not an invoice. It is a bill of entry. So when it is a bill of entry, hence the provision of 180 days is not applicable on the imports. Its basic document is bill of entry, and as a result you can avail the credit on the basis of bill of entry in case of imports. Taxes under reverse charge on the basis of challan, self invoicing, and the other invoice, a tax invoice raised by the other person if he is registered, right? Issue arises in this case also. What's that issue? Where we need to do the self invoicing and where we do not need to go for the self invoicing. I give you one simple example. Let's suppose me, myself, I'm taking services from two lawyers simultaneously, and lawyer services, advocate services, that is covered under reverse charge. So for both the lawyers, it will be covered under reverse charge. But one of the lawyer is only in practice, nothing else. He's not registered under GST. Another lawyer, he is having one rental income also, which amounts to say 25 lakh rupees. He is registered under GST because owing to his rental income. I am taking services from two advocates, one who is registered, another who is not registered. Now, when I'm taking services from a registered person, definitely RCM is to be borne by me, is to be paid by me, borne as well as paid by me, right? But if he is registered, he will be giving me an invoice. He will not charge GST for me, but he will raise a tax invoice to me. He will raise an invoice to me. And that document is a self-contained document. Plus, I will make the payment on the reverse charge. And on the basis of the payment, I will be able to take the credit. For second advocate who is not registered, as he is not registered under GST, he will not be providing me any GST document. As a result, I will have to go for self invoicing plus the payment through the challan. So those both the documents will act as a base document for taking ITC. So in reverse charge, in certain cases we have self invoicing, and in another cases we get the document from the other party itself. In both the cases, taxes to be remitted by the receiver to be paid by the receiver under reverse charge. Now, you all know in composition levy we do not get the any sort of inputs. If I say the basic ITC provision, okay, let me ask you. If I say ITC provisions in GST are covered in which section of GST? Ma'am, it is written in front of us and you are asking us the same question. Yeah, it is section. Just check whether you have read it or not. Section 16 to section 21, they discuss the ITC related provisions and along with the rules 36 to rule 45. Now, the main section of it is section 16. So we started with the definition part. We covered that, okay, input is available on all the types of transaction, including the RCM, including the imports. And then we talked about, now we are going to discuss the provisions of ITC, section 16, 17, and section 18. My dear friends, the basic provisions relating to GST, when it GST ITC, when it is available, what are its eligibilities, and when one gets eligible, and what are its conditions attached, are all contained in section 16. Section 17 talks about, okay, although you have fulfilled the conditions of section 16, सब कुछ करके आए हो, सब कुछ पूरा कर दिया, आउटपुट टैक्सेबल थी, सेक्शन 16 की कंडीशंस फुलफिल कर दी, बट फिर भी हम कुछ केसेस में आपको इनपुट टैक्स अवेल नहीं होने देंगे. द क्रेडिट विल बी इन एलिजिबल क्रेडिट एज पर सेक्शन 17. Then section 18, हमने एक एग्जाम्पल अभी अभी we just discussed that. What was it? Special circumstances में how the credit will be allowed, and we discussed about that. Okay, although the credit is available only and only to the registered person as per the definition of input tax credit, but still in certain special circumstances, like even prior to 30 days of registration, input or input service credit can be allowed. That is given under section 18, and such other many more conditions, like you file ITC 02, ITC 03, taking the credits and all that. Those special circumstances are the part of section 18. Now we are moving to the most important section of ITC, section 16. Friends, if I talk about section 16, every registered person, once again we got the same point. Every registered person, it also says to take ITC, to be eligible to claim the ITC, one must be registered. Shall, मिल जाएगा, subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed. Prescribed in what? Abhi to we talked about from the rules 36 to 45, as may be prescribed, and in the manner specified in section 49, be entitled to take the credit of input tax charged on supply of goods or services or both to him. Now see, please see the words that have been highlighted by me. Entitled to take, entitlement to take. This section entitles one to take the credit of input tax. Now I ask you one thing. What do you think where the entitlement is? Is it talking about GST returns, or is it talking about your books of accounts? To answer this thing, let's read further. It will more clarify your point. Which are used, which are actually being used, or which are purchased with an intention to be used or intended to be used. A wider. You are procuring and you have an intention of being used in the course or furtherance of business. Course of business means during the business. Furtherance means even if you want to expand it, furtherance of business. You know, my dear friends, GST has finished the differences between the items of P&L account and trading account. May it be a P&L item, purchase, the consumables, may it be a trading item, the purchases, directly related. All these are the inputs used in the course or furtherance of business, right? The said amount, and the very important conjunction though I missed. Now you read it. He is entitled to take the credit of input tax charged, whatever is charged on any supply of goods or services or both to him, which are used or intended to be used in the course or furtherance of his business, and said amount, I have marked it as point number 2, relating point number 1 and relating point number 2, and the said amount shall be credited to the electronic credit ledger of such person. So can't you see that? Okay, it is the point number 2 that is talking about credit to the electronic credit ledger. That means this is the point which is talking about the GST returns. 3B, absolutely correct. So entitlement is in the books of accounts, and the credit to electronic ledger is given by a conjunction by adding the words and. And you know, right now we are not discussing section 16 subsection 4, but let me tell you that this section 16 subsection 4, for that provision, these 2 points I consider as base provisions. You know why? Because section 16 subsection 4 also talks about the first limb, and that first limb is entitlement. It does not talk about credit to the electronic credit ledger. So we say हम तो एंटाइटल्ड तभी हो गए थे भाई जब हमने अपनी बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स में उसे क्रेडिट कर दिया था. So your on section 16.1 says that the entitlement and credit to the electronic credit ledger are the two limbs, right? So when we read this, so what we find, what are the eligibility and conditions? Registered person hona chahiye. This is just the simplification of the previous slide. If he is supplying the goods to another person, the person is entitled to take the. We read the same section, but this is what the beauty of the law is. The more you read, every time you get a new meaning. Like here, we saw, okay, there are two limbs attached to it, entitlement to take and credit to electronic credit ledger. Two things. And section 16.4 puts a bar only on limb number one, that it must be taken, entitled to take in the books of accounts, and it is not putting the bar on the second limb, which is credited to the electronic credit ledger, right? So if we talk about course or furtherance of business, I already told you, adding the word furtherance of business further makes it more clear and gives a wider scope to what? To the input tax credit. What do we mean by course or furtherance? It says that it must be a commercial motive. It is not necessary that there must be a profit. It can be loss. There it is not, but the motive is commercial. It can be regular or it can be one time. I've given the example also, exhibition. When we go to exhibition, it might be one time, but our motive is the commercial motive. So hence, if we say it is in the course of furtherance of business, so it must be a commercial motive. And these are the various case laws, my dear friends, that explains what do we mean by used or intended to be used in the course or furtherance of business. It gives it a wider scope when they include the phrase furtherance of business. Even any activity which you do for your employees is in the course of furtherance of business. So some people ask whether these credits related to employees will be allowed. The answer to it, in light of this, if it is in the course of furtherance of business and employees is always course of furtherance of business, commercial motive, it should be allowed until or unless specifically barred by section 17 subsection 5. Now, moving ahead, we are coming to our main section. When we read the definitions, we read 16 subsection 1, which put the bar. We talked about some section 16 subsection 4 also. Now let me come to the main section 16 subsection 2. And I know I have a very intelligible or intelligent audience which already know the conditions of section 16 subsection 2. So can you please write down those conditions? Can you please mention those conditions? 4 conditions. I'm right now talking about 4 conditions. I'm not talking about the amended provisions. What are those? There must be a tax invoice, actual receipt of goods or services. It must be the return. The 4th point is the returns must be filed, but before that we have the taxes must have been paid. 16(2)(c), which is really very very difficult to digest these days. Am I right? Chaliye. So friends, first of all, section 16 subsection 2 starts with a non-obstante clause. Notwithstanding anything contained in this section. In this section, it means forget 16.1 also. Am I right? Forget 16 subsection 4 also. Bhool jaiye sab kuch. Notwithstanding anything contained in this entire section, wherever it goes contradictory, registered person, तुम्हें इनपुट टैक्स का क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा टिल द टाइम तुम ये 4 कंडीशंस पूरी कर देते हो. कंडीशंस वही अभी जो हमने डिस्कस की. नाउ इसमें 4 कंडीशंस में क्या आपको कोई भी कंडीशन ऐसी मिली जहां ये लिखा हुआ था कि भाई 2A या 2B में दिखना जरूरी है तभी इनपुट टैक्स का क्रेडिट देंगे? Could you find that? Could you find that? The answer to it is no. I'm not talking about the amended provisions. I'm not talking about the amended provisions. I say if we say that it is not required, so it was not there. My dear friends, leave sections. Even in Rule 36, Sub Rule 4, that was given, the wording says it must be furnished by the supplier in his outward supply return. In his GSTR-1, outward supply statement, outward statement, I should say, GSTR-1 is not a return. So some people say 16(2)(c). So let me make it clear. Section 16(2)(c) says the taxes must be paid. Paid to whom? To the government exchequer. Does 2A or 2B is a conclusive proof that the payment has been made to the government? The answer to it is no. Let me discuss two instances right now. First instance, I say I didn't file my 3B, or I filed my 3B with a very lower amount, only 500 rupees tax payable. But in GSTR-1, I put the number of Mr. Shah, right? GST number, and I put the this much amount has been supplied to him. It is reflecting in his 2A/2B also. Now, is it a conclusive proof tax has been paid? No. I have not paid the tax in 3B, but it is still reflecting in 2A or 2B of Mr. Shah. I take the another example, second example, where I say I have paid the taxes in 3B. पे करके आई हूं भाई, पूरा टैक्स 3B में पे किया है. But inadvertently, I missed quoting the GST number of Mr. Shah in GSTR-1. Tax credit is not appearing in his 2A or 2B. So, tax paid but not proved. So, I have discussed two scenarios where taxes was paid but still not reflecting. For then another scenario where taxes have not been paid but still was reflecting in 2A or 2B of the another party. So 16(2)(c) cannot be directly justified with the appearance of the tax credit entries in 2A or 2B of the registered taxable person, the person claiming input tax credit. So we always say the rule 36(4) is a rule without the parent provision, because the main section 16, which overrides all 16 subsection 2, which overrides all other sections, none of the conditions says that it must appear in 2A or 2B. And that was taken, and the amendment was proposed in the form of addition of subclause AA. 16 subsection 2 clause AA got inserted, wherein, my dear friends, for the first time, now you see the difference between the wording of rule 36 sub rule 4 and the 16(2) AA, the amended budgetary clause. It is yet to be amended, yet to be made effective. The budget introduced the provision, but the effective date is not yet notified. What it says: the details of the input or debit note referred to in clause A has been furnished by the supplier in the statement of outward supplies. This wording is same as given under rule 36 sub rule 4. But now, for the first time in the rules and the act, the words that have been added are and. भाई उसने तो फर्निश कर दी, हो सकता है उसने B2C में फर्निश कर दी. But now, and such details have been communicated to the recipient of such invoice. अब बोलते हैं भाई उसको communicate करना भी जरूरी है in the manner specified under section 37, means in the form of 2A or 2B. तो अभी भी नहीं बताया कि 2A और 2B कौन सा डॉक्यूमेंट ज्यादा रिलायबल है. पहले तो बात ही नहीं करता था, पहले तो एंड से पहले बात की लाइन ही नहीं थी. पहले तो सीधा बोलता था भाई सामने वाले ने अपनी स्टेटमेंट ऑफ GSTR-1 में फर्निश किया हो, फिर चाहे B2B B2C बन जाए. क्यों? बट नाउ दे हैव एडेड इट मस्ट बी कम्युनिकेटेड ऑल्सो. अगेन no reference. You tell me 2A or 2B, which one is more authenticated document? The law does not refer to any, and it cannot directly refer to. When somebody asks me, which one is more reliable, 2A or 2B? My answer to it is we cannot directly reply to this question because we need to analyze the difference between 2A and 2B for a particular month. Why it appears? My dear friends, 2B is a static document. 2A is the dynamic document. It keeps on changing. क्या मतलब dynamic और static का? I give you an example. Right now we are in November month, and let's suppose I change one invoice belonging to April 2021. If I change any invoice pertaining to April 2021, in 2A, it will reflect in April itself, the amended invoice. But if I talk about 2B, it will come in 2B of November and not in 2B, 2A, not in 2B of April 2021. सिंपल, कोई अमेंडमेंट करिए, वो पीछे जाके चेंज कर देगा 2A को, बट 2B पीछे की चेंज नहीं होती है, 2B करंट, 2B डेट वाइज चलती है, फिक्स्ड, ब्लॉक्ड हो जाती है, कौन सी डेट से अभी बताऊंगी. सो दैट इज वाई गवर्नमेंट बिल ब्रॉट दिस. अब सबसे पहले अगर फर्क है 2A 2B में, व्हेन देयर इज एनी डिफरेंस, सो वी नीड टू एनालाइज दैट व्हाट इज द रीजन ऑफ दैट डिफरेंस. आया क्यों, कारण, अरे मेरे किसी सप्लायर ने अपनी GSTR-1 डिले कर दी. अब जब उसने डिले करके फाइल की, 2B तो नवंबर में आ गया और 2A जाके पिछले मंथ का हिट करा. That is why the difference is. Secondly, उसने अपनी जो GSTR-1 पुरानी वाली सारी अब फाइल कर दी. Now the 2B will show a huge amount of credit, whereas the registered person, he has already taken the credit in the period to which the invoice belongs. So we need to analyze for this. Yes, we have a number of softwares that do the matchings for us. So other than that, your books of accounts should also be prepared in the likewise manner. How? Whenever you put an entry that, okay, this particular purchase debit, ITC debit to Mr. X, Mr. Supplier, I have to give the money. But it is not reflecting in your 2B. Friends, government brought this 2B concept to defer your input tax, which is not appearing in your 2B. So now you say it is not appearing in 2B. What should I do? Pass the reversal entry. Deferred ITC to ITC. We must keep the bill-wise record of those invoices which are not appearing in 2A or 2B, so that we can communicate to our suppliers that, okay, these are the invoices that not appearing, that needs to be checked or refurnished or furnished. So when 16(2) got introduced, it led to postponement. And the day 16(2) will be implemented from the next year, 2022. You had a 5% leverage. Let's have a look. Which rule? 36 sub rule 4. You had 5% leverage. It started with 20%, then reduced to 10%. Now it is 5%. That will also go away. The credit will be given to the person only if it will appear in 2A or 2B. So now we all talked about all these 4 conditions. I'm not going to repeat. And out of these, 16(2)(c) is really acting as a huddle these days. Why I say it as a huddle? Because all the conditions are fulfilled, but you are giving tax. Now I say I am dealing with now we don't take Mr. Shah. Let's take somebody else. Now I say, let's suppose I am dealing with Mr. Rahul, right? If I am having a particular transaction with Mr. Rahul, then in that case, I am giving money to him. Sir, this is your payment and this is the tax. But Mr. Rahul is busy enough, or he didn't deposit the taxes with the government. Should my credit be debarred? Considering section 16(2)(c) stating the taxes have not been credited to the exchequer of the government. Sir, according to me, I come to these documents also, but let me talk about the basic provision 16(2)(c) first. If I say that, okay, the government is asking me to do such think that is impossible. 16(2)(c), the insertion of the new clause 16(2)(a), that it must be furnished by the supplier in his outward return. I can control my returns. I can assure my returns must be timely, but I cannot assure, okay, that Mr. Rahul must file his return timely so that the credit should reflect in my 2B and I should be eligible to take the credit. Are how government can do so? We all have read the basic maxim, legal maxim, the lex non cognizant ad impossibilia. How you can ask or compel a man to do something which is impossible? If I talk about the pre GST regime judgments, we had a number of judgments like the Honorable Supreme Court judgment in case of KK Industries. We have Delhi High Court, Arise India, On-Quest Merchandising by Delhi High Court again. We have Gherumal Balchan judgment by Punjab and Haryana High Court, Altaf Shoes, Infinity, lots of judgment which says you cannot ask the impossible. I can control my action because the similar provision existing in pre-GST regime also, in VAT regime also. But here the point is same. The matter is taken up in the current regime also, and we have various high court judgments like DY Bethel, Balco, Sahil Enterprises. But let me tell you, the issue is still semi-addressed. Why? Let's have a look on the Bethel, DY Bethel, the Honorable Madras High Court judgment. In this, Bethel is a purchaser and Charles and Shanti, they were the sellers. Bethel purchased the goods, made the payment through proper banking channel. Taxes were paid to Charles and Shanti, but Charles and Shanti did not pay the tax and they were fraudsters. Now, they did not pay the tax. The department raised the objection and made the addition of ITC in Bethel, stating your ITC is ineligible because the condition of section 16(2)(c) is not fulfilled. Bethel sir, अगर हम accept कर लेते हैं ना, तो वो चीज accept हो जाती है. And law, rather I should say, you say fortune favors the brave, I say law also favors the brave. So whosoever rises against it gets the benefit. Bethel raised the objection and said, why you are coming to me being a purchasing dealer? Charles and Shanti, did you inquire who gave registration to Charles and Shanti? Department itself. Whom they were representing by having the GSTN number? Department itself. Now, when he is not deposited the tax, you are directly coming to the purchaser without questioning the seller, without making his number the cancelled, without taking any action against him. You are directly proceeding against the purchaser. The Honorable Court took up the matter and he said, please listen, the court did not mention that, okay, department cannot proceed against Bethel. The Honorable Court said the person who supplied the goods ought to have been examined first. Then the person should have come, the department should have come to Bethel. But as no action has been taken against Charles and Shanti, it is the seller who must be examined first. So issue discuss तो हुआ, but ये नहीं हुआ कि purchaser पर आ ही नहीं सकते क्योंकि purchaser ने tax pay कर दिया है already Charles and Shanti को. But ये हुआ कि पहले Charles and Shanti and then the purchaser DY Bethel. So friends, इससे एक edge मिला, but not the completely as we have in the pre-GST regime judgments, which says you cannot ask the impossible. You cannot ask me to sit in that other person's shoes and do his or her filings. No. Secondly, the same issue was taken up in case of Balco also, where the notices for mismatch of ITC between the 3B and GSTR-2. मत बोलो, हमें भी बहुत आए रखे हैं. Am I right? भर भर के notice आए हैं. So, if we talk about GSTR-3B, GSTR-2A mismatch, the same notice was issued to Balco and the recovery for the same has been stayed. And friends, हम कहते हैं आपने तो GST number दिया था सामने वाले को. Now the department, the government has raised the standards, the level of verifications for giving or allotting the GSTN numbers. So somewhere we are again moving back to the pre-GST regime where lots of inquiries, verifications, physical verifications were taken up for granting the numbers. Right? All right. So Another case law in the same basket, Sahil Enterprises, and it again says, and the honorable court has here given a direction that this is not a small issue. 16(2)(c), the honorable court has directed that the government must come up with a proper answer to it, because it's not a small issue, it's a big issue affecting a lots of people. A proper legislation needs to be framed by the parliament, which is under challenge, and a notice for the same has been issued to the attorney general. So we talked about latest case laws where section 16(2)(c) vis-a-vis GSTR 2B vis-a-vis 16(2)(a). कुछ लोग कहते हैं 16(2)(a) का अमेंडमेंट प्रोस्पेक्टिव है कि रिट्रोस्पेक्टिव. लेट मी आस्क यू, प्रोस्पेक्टिव है कि रिट्रोस्पेक्टिव? द डे इट विल बी इम्प्लीमेंटेड, जिस दिन हो जाएगा, ये प्रोस्पेक्टिव है कि रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव? इसका मतलब 16(2)(a) आते ही मुझे तो वही क्रेडिट मिलेगा जो 2A 2B में आएगा. एब्सोल्युटली, इट इज अ प्रोस्पेक्टिव वन. अरे ये रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव हो ही नहीं सकता. द प्रोसीजरल चेंजेस कैन बी रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव, बट हाउ यू कैन चेंज अ substantive procedure relating to claim of ITC retrospectively? So it's a prospective amendment from the year 2021-22 when it will come into picture. The one will be getting only those credits which will be appearing in 2A 2B, but somehow it weakens the cases where the prior to this amendment being brought into force. इसका मतलब इससे पहले ये प्रोविजन एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करता था. रूल 36 सब रूल 4 का कोई बैकअप ही नहीं था कि वो एक्ट से कोई प्रोविजन लेता. सो फॉर दोज केसेस, फॉर द प्री पीरियड 2022, द पॉइंट ऑफ द वैलिडिटी ऑफ 36(4) becomes challengeable. सो फ्रेंड्स, 36 सब रूल 4 की अगर मैं बात करूं, सबसे पहले मैं रूल 36 की बात करती हूँ, जो हमारे रूल्स डिस्कस करते हैं. You know how many documents are there in GST? How many documents? 8 documents. हाँ, जब इनकम टैक्स का ऑडिट करते हैं, so we put tick 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 on documentation. What about GST? Yes, we have invoices, we have debit notes, credit notes, bill of entries, bill of supply, and such other documents which are there. And on the basis of these documents, not bill of entry, it's bill of supply. On the basis of bill of entry for claiming the imports. Otherwise, we have various documents, receipt vouchers, payment vouchers, and so on, self generation of invoices. On the basis of these documentary evidences like debit notes, bill of entry, invoices, ISD distribution, the one is eligible to take the credit of inputs, right? But now those credits will be available which have been uploaded by the supplier in his GSTR-1 after the amendment comes into picture, or in IFF, in order to claim the input tax credit. Friends, this rule 36 sub rule 4, 20%, 10%, 5% will get washed away when once 16(2)(a) will be in picture. 36 sub rule 4 applies to invoices and debit notes. IGST on imports cannot be covered because bill of entry is the document. RCM not covered by it. ISD not covered by it. सो वो पहले से ही कवर्ड नहीं थे. इनवॉइसेस और डेबिट नोट्स ही इसमें कवर्ड थे. तो जो आपको 5% एडिशनल मिलता था, दैट विल नाउ बी नॉट अवेलेबल आफ्टर दिस अमेंडमेंट. Moreover, if I talk about the eligibility and the conditions, हमने बहुत सारी 16 सेक्शन की कंडीशंस डिस्कस की, 36 सब रूल 4 की 180 डेज पेमेंट को थोड़ा सा टच किया. नाउ लेट मी कम टू द GSTR 2B. फ्रेंड्स, telling the data books with GSTR 2B is a great task, especially in the good undertakings with good volume of data. It is cumbersome, so we many a times take the help of various softwares in order to reconcile the same. And if we talk about GSTR 2B, it is an auto drafted ITC statement. You don't have to do anything. The data will automatically move to 2B. It will take your data from your GSTR-1, GSTR-5, 6, IFF and ICE gate. सबसे डेटा इकट्ठा करेगा, 14th ऑफ द मंथ को ये स्टेटमेंट टू बी आप सबके सामने आती है. यू हैव ऑलरेडी बीन फॉलोइंग इट. एंड क्या करते हैं, क्वार्टरली वालों का डेटा जो है, जो मंथली का डेटा है उसकी कट ऑफ लग जाती है 11th को, और जो मंथली वाले हैं उनकी कट ऑफ लग जाती है, जो क्वार्टरली वाले हैं उनकी कट ऑफ लग जाती है 13th को. एंड देन इकट्ठा करके 14th को द स्टेटमेंट इज जनरेटेड. Right now, if I talk about this, I'm not discussing these examples with you कि अगर लेट हो जाएगी सर, अगर आपकी टू बी लेट हो जाती है तो उसका क्रेडिट नेक्स्ट पीरियड में पोस्टपोन हो जाता है. In 2B, we have various sections, but let me discuss the main provisions. These 2B, what 2B is going to reflect? Imports. Yes, your import data will be there in 2B. Everything will be there in 2B except two things. Only two red marks. You know, what are those two red marks? RCM on import of service. If you are paying RCM on import of service, reason, अरे import of services का कोई trail available ही नहीं है. When there is no trail available, ना तो कोई barriers है, ना आपने एक import of service की है, सामने वाला return file करता नहीं है, there will be no reflection in 2B. Second, if you are having RCM being applicable from unregistered person, because unregistered person will also not file GSTR-1. Other than that, imports, other RCM, whenever RCM is from some registered person, like advocate, if he is registered, like transporter, if he is registered, ISD, any other ITC will all reflect in 2B. It will not only show your eligible credits, but 2B is also going to show your ineligible credits also. And you know what are the basis for those ineligible credits? We say GST is one nation, one tax. I always say one nation, one tax is a myth. It is one nation, uniform tax, but it is not one nation, one tax. Reason? I being sitting in Delhi, if I go to Maharashtra, Mumbai, and I stay in a hotel there, I will not be getting the credit of Maharashtrian VAT. Not only SGST portion, but even the CGST portion is not allowed as a credit. तो स्टेट ऑफ रिसिपिएंट एंड द प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई आर डिफरेंट. अरे कैसे पता लगेगा? उसके जीएसटीएन नंबर से, उसका जीएसटीएन नंबर डिफरेंट होगा. द रिसिपिएंट एंड प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई आर डिफरेंट. इट विल पुट इट अंडर द कॉलम इनएलिजिबल. सेक्शन 16 सबसेक्शन 4 के बाद, टाइम पीरियड निकलने के बाद आप जो क्रेडिट्स लोगे उस पीरियड के पहले के, वो ऑटोमेटिकली उन क्रेडिट्स को इनएलिजिबल क्रेडिट्स में डाल देते हैं. अब नाउ यू सी, वो हम कहते हैं 16 सबसेक्शन 4 में जो क्रेडिट्स विच आर नॉट अलाउड एज पर 16 सबसेक्शन 4, अगर सामने वाला डिले करता है अपनी रिटर्न फाइलिंग करने में, although 16 subsection 4 talks about entitlement, but still it says जो invoices, let's suppose invoices pertaining to January 2021, but अगर वो अक्टूबर 20th की यानी सितंबर 2021 की रिटर्न के बाद आपके क्रेडिट्स 2B में रिफ्लेक्ट होगा, that will also be ineligible credit. सीधा है ना, पहले जनवरी में आप ले नहीं पाओगे. क्यों? सेक्शन 16 जब द रूल 36 सब रूल 4 will come into picture, it will say you will get the credit once it appears in 2B. It will appear in 2B post period 16 subsection 4. It will not be allowed. It will be shown as ineligible credit. Section, yes, but 2B does not. इतना समझदार नहीं है 2B. वो 17 subsection 5 के ineligible credits, 42-43 के रिवर्सल क्रेडिट्स को 2B हाईलाइट नहीं करता है. राइट और अगर मैं आईटीसी ऑन इंपोर्ट्स की बात करूं, फ्रेंड्स, आईटीसी ऑन इंपोर्ट्स जो था वो 2B में रिफ्लेक्ट जरूर करता है, बट अभी तक ये इंफॉर्मेशन अवेलेबल नहीं है. ITC on import is a different criteria because ITC on import of goods is based upon bill of entry. It is not covered by Rule 36 Sub Rule 4 also. ITC on import of goods is based upon the condition of 180 days is also not applicable to it. And even the last date of claiming ITC section 16 subsection 4 is also not applicable to it. No 2A to 2B reflection is mandatory. 2A reflection is mandatory for import of goods, but for import of goods, 2B reflection will be made mandatory once it starts appearing thereon. But still, import of services, it will not form part of your 2B. So, friends, what is the main issue in it? The main issue which I want to discuss with all of you is, after the introduction of 16 to AA, the additional leverage of 5% will be wiped out. The credit only will be eligible, which will be appearing in your 2A or rather 2B in that period only. So you have to maintain the supplier wise, the bill wise record of everything, keeping on side the credits that are old and now appearing will be eligible in this month, and the credits which you have already taken and now appearing will not be eligible. So we need to maintain the proper records, proper reconciliations, so only then it will suffice the purpose. With this, I end up my presentation. Thanks to all of you for a great participation and listening me for continuously almost 1 hour. Thank you so much. And with this, I end up the presentation. Thanks a lot.